Hello, welcome to Marick Masters on Topic, Business, the Economy, Labor, and Politics. Today's episode very briefly treats the subject of auto tariffs, focusing on 5 key questions that are in the minds of people facing these tariffs. I'm a professor of business, emeritus, commentator, and podcaster. You can find me at my email address and YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Thank you very much. 5 key questions. They are: what are the tariffs that President Trump imposed on vehicles and auto parts? Who pays the tariffs? How could the increased tariffs affect the cost of vehicles? What will be the economic impact of these tariffs? And what does President Trump hope to accomplish by raising tariffs on imported vehicles and auto parts? How could the increased tariffs affect the cost of vehicles? Here's a hypothetical example. Let's say a U.S. auto manufacturer, Ford, GM, Stellantis, Volkswagen, imports a car it produces in Mexico that is valued at $50,000 by the Customs Bureau. 50% of the value of the components of that car are produced from non-U.S. countries of origin. That means 50% of the car itself is made up of products that are not manufactured in the U.S. 25% of the tariff will apply to the half of the non-U.S. made part of the vehicle that is valued in total at $50,000 by the Customs Bureau. The cost to the auto manufacturer importer will be 25% of the half of the cost of the vehicle, $25,000, which amounts to $6,250. That could end up finding its way onto the price to some extent that is paid ultimately by the consumer in purchasing the vehicle at a dealership or through another venue. Who pays the tariff? The importer, that is in this case Ford, GM, or Stellantis. Whoever the importer is in the United States pays the tariff to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. The U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency transmits the tariff receipts to the U.S. Department of Treasury. In 2024, the fiscal year, which just closed a few months ago, the U.S. federal government collected $77 billion from tariff duties. That amounts to less than 1% of the total revenues it collected across all sources: income taxes, payroll taxes, corporate taxes, excise taxes, etc., which amounted to $4.9 trillion. That's $77 billion, which we collected in 2024, of $4.9 trillion from custom duties or tariffs. Importers of the covered automobiles and auto parts determine how to manage the increased tariffs, which they may pass on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Alternatively, they can eat those increased costs, but I think it's doubtful that they would do that. Here's a little bit more in specific terms about the language used in the President's executive order for auto parts and autos that was issued on March 26, 2025. This executive order is available on the White House website. What will be the economic impact of tariffs? Economists, analysts, and a variety of other experts who study this matter disagree on the potential impact on inflation, unemployment, and economic growth. There are alternative theories of the case, and the ultimate impact will depend largely on the extent to which these tariffs are in effect or whether they're rolled back at some point in time due to changing circumstances, and also on the behavior of the manufacturers and the consumers. But it's been suggested, and I have sources that you can go to look at where this information comes from, that tariffs could increase the price of vehicles to the extent that auto manufacturers pass them on to consumers. If this has a spillover effect, it could be somewhat inflationary, although there is disagreement about the extent to which one-time tariffs may actually contribute to inflation. Such increases could depress demand for price-sensitive consumers and lead to reductions in automakers' profits, leading to layoffs. If you were interested in buying a car, for example, that's imported from Mexico, and that car has a 25% increase in its price, then you may defer purchasing it, and you may defer purchasing an automobile altogether, and therefore the revenue or the sales to the company go down, their profits go down, and they might be forced to slow production at certain sites, leading to layoffs. Also, to the extent that consumers shift demand to used cars, the prices for such vehicles may increase. Similarly, to the extent that consumers may shift their demand to U.S. manufactured cars, which are not subject to the tariff, the price of those cars may go up if there's insufficient supply to meet the demand. Thus, it's a difficult situation to evaluate. There are pros and cons to tariffs. Economists disagree about the estimated impact, but they have sophisticated models which estimate those impacts, and they can provide estimates that are only as good as the assumptions built into those models. What does President Trump hope to accomplish by imposing tariffs on autos and auto parts? The theory of the case for tariffs that the Trump administration argues, and the most effective, I think, and succinct person to go to who has articulated the case of the president's tariffs is Peter Navarro, who is a special representative on trade to the president, who served in his first administration and is a Harvard-trained economist. The case is as follows. Tariffs are imposed to protect auto manufacturing companies and workers. Protection of this industry is vital to national security. We need a manufacturing base in order to produce products to defend ourselves should we get in some sort of a kinetic war. Consumers will shift their purchases to U.S. manufactured rather than imported vehicles, thus building the auto manufacturers based in the United States, whether they be the big three, Ford, General Motors, or Stellantis, or alternatively, the companies foreign-based that produce in the United States, such as Honda, Toyota, Hyundai, Volkswagen, etc. Auto manufacturer revenues will grow to permit them to create jobs in U.S.-based production sites, and tariffs will also increase federal revenues, which can offset reduction in taxpayers' income taxes. Estimates have been put forward that over time, the tariffs that Trump is going to impose on the economy, including those on auto, can raise about $600 billion a year in revenue. In the 19th century and early 20th century, the U.S. raised most of its revenue for the federal government from tariffs. Only with the advent of the income tax in the early 1900s did we shift to that as a primary source of revenues to fund the federal government. Whether this pans out or not as expected is uncertain. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, but Trump will add certainty to it today, at least in terms of identifying, in addition to the tariffs imposed on autos and steel and aluminum, which he's announced, other tariffs that will be imposed on all industries across various countries in order to encourage reciprocity, that is, reductions in tariffs in those countries, and also to protect the nation's security. Here's a little bit more about myself. I hope you find this statement interesting, and I look forward to talking to you more. Thank you and have a good day.